Every day in New York City, something happens that almost no one ever sees. Inside courthouse basements, behind locked steel doors, a controlled operation begins the moment a judge says, "Remanded." Court officers move detainees into holding cells. DOC staff gather paperwork, and unmarked transport buses wait in restricted loading areas for the next group to be moved. This is not a simple ride across town. It's a tightly monitored system designed to move people through one of the busiest cities in America without drawing attention. A process shaped by strict policies, legal oversight, and decades of controversy surrounding the city's jail system. Before the detainee ever reaches Rikers Island, a sequence of hidden steps unfolds with precision, steps most New Yorkers will never witness, but thousands experience every year. This is the real journey from courthouse to confinement, and the unseen path to one of America's most notorious jail complexes. Before we dive in, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to HFD Achieve Crimes. Every bit of support helps us reveal the hidden truths behind the world's prisons and crime documentaries. Now let's go inside. The transfer to Rikers Island begins long before a detainee ever steps onto a bus. It starts in the courtroom, often just seconds after a judge speaks the words that change everything. Defendant is remanded. In that instant, responsibility shifts. Until now, the defendant has been under the custody of NYPD or the New York State court system. But once the judge orders remand, legal authority transfers to the New York City Department of Correction, the agency in charge of detention, transportation, and eventual intake at Rikers Island. The change is immediate, but the movement is not. Court officers escort the individual out of the courtroom and into the courthouse holding cells, commonly called the pens. These areas, tucked away behind locked doors or beneath the courtrooms, are where the transition from courtroom to custody truly takes shape. Inside, detainees wait on metal benches under constant CCTV monitoring. The holding cells vary by borough, but all follow similar guidelines: secure doors, separated sections for different classifications, and controlled access monitored by both court and DOC personnel. For many, this holding area is the last connection to the free world before entering the city's jail system. While detainees wait, DOC officers begin reviewing and verifying the paperwork that legally permits them to take custody. Court clerks transmit commitment forms, medical notes, and case details to DOC representatives stationed in courthouse intake rooms. Every detail must match identity, charges, warrants, and any specific needs or restrictions. One error can delay the entire process. Medical alerts are also recorded at this stage. If a detainee has injuries, medications, or mental health flags noted by court staff, DOC must document them before transport. The full medical screening will not happen until arrival at Rikers, but these early notes determine how quickly someone can be moved and whether special transport considerations are required. The detainee waits while this system churns, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Oversight reports have long documented delays caused by late paperwork, high-volume court days, or limited DOC staff. During this period, detainees typically have controlled access to bathrooms, water, and occasionally food, depending on the time of day. But regardless of how long they wait, one fact remains. Once the remand order is spoken, the path to Rikers Island is already underway. The system has shifted, custody has changed, and the next step in the journey begins the moment DOC officers walk into the holding area and call a detainee's name. Once a detainee is moved out of the courtroom, the next stage of the transfer begins inside the courthouse holding system, a network of secured rooms commonly known as the pens. These areas, hidden behind restricted corridors and reinforced doors, are the first stop on the path to Rikers Island. The holding cells look different in every borough, but they share the same core structure: metal benches, thick steel doors, separation units for different classifications, and constant surveillance through CCTV cameras. Court officers control the environment, but the Department of Correction begins preparing for custody the moment paperwork arrives. Inside these cells, detainees wait as DOC officers review the commitment papers that legally authorize their transfer. These documents include the judge's remand order, arrest details, personal identifiers, medical notes, and any special handling instructions. Nothing moves forward until every line is verified. Even a missing signature or incorrect booking number can halt the entire process. During this time, detainees experience one of the most uncertain parts of the journey. They don't know how long they will wait, how many others will be transported with them, or when DOC officers will arrive to take custody. Oversight reports, published by court monitors and independent agencies, have repeatedly noted that delays often come from two sources: late court decisions and staffing shortages. If a courthouse has a heavy docket or if paperwork takes longer than expected, detainees can remain in the pens for extended periods. Bathrooms are usually located nearby, and detainees may receive water or basic food depending on the schedule, but the environment remains controlled and heavily monitored. Small conflicts can escalate quickly, and officers are trained to move detainees between cells based on separation rules. Gang conflicts, co-defendants, juveniles, medical concerns, or documented incompatibilities. Meanwhile, the Department of Correction prepares to take physical custody. DOC transport officers, assigned to each borough, check the courthouse roster and begin forming groups based on capacity, security classification, and the number of available buses. Their responsibility is not just movement. It's maintaining safety, order, and legal compliance during one of the most sensitive stages of custody transfer. Once DOC confirms the paperwork and verifies the detainee's identity, the shift in physical custody becomes official. From this moment on, DOC, not the court system, controls the detainee's movement. Officers conduct standardized searches, gather personal property, and separate detainees by classification to avoid conflicts during transport. And as groups begin to form, the tension inside the holding area rises. The next step is the loading dock, the final doorway between the courthouse and the journey across New York City. For many detainees, this is the moment they truly realize they're not going home today. When the paperwork is cleared and the groups are formed, detainees are escorted from the courthouse holding cells toward one of the most controlled environments in New York City's criminal justice system, the DOC transport bus. These buses are nothing like regular city vehicles. Designed for durability and security, they operate as mobile extensions of the jail system, built to move detainees across boroughs without attracting public attention. Most people who walk past them on the street have no idea who or what is inside. The buses vary in size depending on the borough. High-volume courts like Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens commonly use large correctional buses fitted with steel seats, interior cages, reinforced windows, and partitioned compartments that keep detainees separated by classification. Smaller vans or wagons are used for lower-volume locations, special cases, or detainees requiring medical considerations. Regardless of the vehicle type, every transport follows strict DOC policy. Before boarding, detainees undergo a standardized screening process. Officers conduct pat-downs, check restraint placement, and verify each detainee's identity against the transport manifest. Strip searches are not allowed at this stage unless there is specific legal justification. Oversight reports have emphasized that separation rules are crucial. Individuals with known conflicts, documented gang affiliations, or medical flags must be assigned to the correct section of the bus. Once the boarding begins, detainees are directed into specific compartments. The steel doors and barred windows create an environment designed for control, not comfort. Many buses include welded steel seats, reinforced mesh dividers, and in some cases, internal cameras used to monitor behavior during transit. The officers on board, typically a driver and one or more escorts, are trained to watch for medical issues, disturbances, and signs of agitation. Ventilation inside the buses has been a repeated point of criticism in public reports. In summer, heat can build quickly. In winter, poor airflow can make the ride uncomfortable. While DOC states that efforts are made to maintain climate systems, detainees often describe the transport as one of the most physically difficult parts of the journey. Waiting times inside the bus can vary widely. Some transports depart within minutes. Others remain parked as DOC coordinates pickups across multiple courthouses. Timing depends on paperwork, staffing, and volume of detainees across the city. In some cases, buses wait for access windows to the Rikers Island bridge or delays at intake facilities. From the outside, the buses look ordinary, white vehicles with minimal markings. But inside, they hold layers of separation, reinforced steel, and mandatory restraints. For detainees, the transition from the courthouse to the bus marks the point of no return. Once they step through that steel door, the journey to Rikers Island is underway, and there is no stepping off until the vehicle reaches one of the most controlled entry points in New York. As the engine starts and the doors lock, the courthouse feels like a distant world behind them. Ahead lies the complex route through the city, the controlled checkpoints, and the final crossing into Rikers Island. Once the transport bus pulls away from the courthouse loading area, the detainees enter one of the most unusual parts of the journey, traveling through the busiest city in America while completely unseen by the people around them. The DOC bus merges into normal traffic like any other oversized vehicle, moving past taxis, commuters, pedestrians, and cyclists, none of whom realize that detainees are sitting behind reinforced steel panels just a few feet away. There are no sirens, no escort vehicles, and no flashing lights. DOC transport operates quietly by design. The goal is efficiency, not attention. Every route is selected based on time of day, traffic conditions, and the courthouse location. Although DOC does not publish official transport maps for security reasons, public oversight reports and investigative journalism have outlined common patterns. From Manhattan courts, buses often head toward the FDR Drive, using the highway to move north toward the RFK, Triborough, Bridge area. Brooklyn transports typically join the BQE before connecting to the Grand Central Parkway. Queens detainees travel shorter routes, sometimes navigating through dense neighborhood roads before reaching the highway access points. Transfers from the Bronx usually involve local roads that feed directly toward the bridge. Staten Island detainees may travel in smaller vans crossing the Verrazano Narrows Bridge before making the long trip north toward Queens. Traffic plays a major role in this stage. Rush hour, construction, bad weather, or an accident can extend the trip far beyond the expected window. Oversight reports have documented detainees spending long periods on buses due to congestion near bottlenecks and bridge approaches. For the officers, this part of the ride requires constant monitoring, watching for medical issues, disturbances, or passengers showing signs of stress or agitation. Inside the bus, conversations are limited. The steel dividers, reinforced mesh, and restraints create an environment where detainees often sit in silence, unsure of how long the trip will take. The bus may stop and start repeatedly as it navigates through the city, causing the ride to feel longer than it is. At this stage, the courthouse is long behind them, and the reality of Rikers becomes more unavoidable with every turn. As the vehicle approaches northern Queens, all routes eventually converge toward a single point, the entrance to the Rikers Island Bridge, officially known as the Francis R. Bono Memorial Bridge. This is the only road in and out of Rikers Island. Every DOC bus must pass through its checkpoint before continuing to the intake facilities. Here, the journey shifts from public city roads to one of the most tightly controlled access points in New York. DOC officers stationed at the checkpoint verify the transport vehicle, confirm staffing, and ensure the route was completed without incident. Civilian vehicles, including attorneys, visitors, and contractors, also use this bridge, but detainee transports receive priority processing to maintain movement and safety. For many detainees, the sight of the bridge is the moment where everything feels real. Once the bus crosses it, they leave behind the noise of the city and enter a world entirely controlled by the Department of Correction. On the other side lies the massive jail complex, intake units, housing facilities, medical areas, and administrative centers. The bridge is not just a road. It is the dividing line between two lives, the one they had before the judge said remanded, and the one waiting for them inside Rikers Island. Once the DOC transport bus crosses the Rikers Island Bridge, the journey shifts from movement to processing. The detainees are now inside one of the largest jail complexes in the United States, and the first stop is almost always the Eric M. Taylor Center, EMTC, or another designated intake unit, depending on classification, age, or medical status. Here, the formal entry into the New York City jail system begins. The moment the bus pulls into the secured intake area, DOC officers direct detainees to exit in controlled groups. Identities are verified again, restraints are checked, and detainees are guided through corridors into the processing floor. Intake at Rikers is not a single step. It is a sequence of mandatory procedures designed to document, assess, and classify every individual entering custody. The first stage is identity confirmation. Officers compare the detainee's physical presence with commitment paperwork, court documents, and digital records. Mistakes in identification are rare, but taken extremely seriously, as they can lead to unlawful detention or misplacement within the system. After identification comes property handling. Detainees surrender personal items, clothing, jewelry, electronics, and documents, which are cataloged and secured. Only approved items follow them into custody. Next is medical screening, one of the most critical components of intake. Rikers Island has strict requirements to identify health needs at this early stage. Medical staff conduct basic assessments, check vital signs, review prescription needs, and screen for conditions such as withdrawal symptoms, injuries, or mental health crises. Public oversight reports frequently highlight the importance of this step because medical issues can rapidly escalate inside jail populations without early intervention. Following medical review, detainees move to photographing and fingerprinting. Digital imaging captures identifying details that are uploaded into DOC databases. Background checks, warrant confirmations, and case status updates occur simultaneously behind the scenes. The classification phase determines where the detainee will be housed. This assessment considers factors such as age, gender, past behavior in custody, gang affiliations, when documented, medical needs, vulnerability concerns, and any known conflicts. Classification officers decide whether a detainee is placed in general population, protective custody, medical housing, mental health units, or specialized facilities. Throughout intake, detainees may spend significant time in waiting areas. Oversight reports describe these environments as controlled but often crowded during peak hours. Officers monitor movement closely, ensuring separation rules are maintained and preventing conflicts. Every step is documented. Every movement is logged. For many detainees, this part of the process is mentally overwhelming. The courthouse felt temporary. The transport felt uncertain, but intake at Rikers marks the moment where the reality of confinement settles in. The noise of doors slamming, officers calling names, and detainees moving in groups reinforces that this is no longer a holding period. It is incarceration. By the time intake is complete, the detainee has been registered, assessed, searched, medically screened, classified, and processed into the DOC population. Their next destination will be a housing unit somewhere within Rikers Island, another world with its own routines, tensions, and challenges. But no matter where they end up, the journey they began in the courtroom ends here, inside the walls of one of America's most infamous jail complexes. The end of intake marks a major shift in the detainee's journey. After hours of processing, screening, and verification, the focus turns to placement, where the person will actually live inside Rikers Island. This decision shapes everything that follows: daily routine, safety levels, and the environment they must adapt to. Housing assignments begin with classification officers reviewing every detail gathered during intake. Their evaluation includes medical needs, behavioral history, mental health concerns, gang affiliations listed in official records, past incidents in custody, and any protective alerts. Each factor can redirect a detainee to a specific type of housing, from general population units to enhanced supervision blocks, protective custody, or specialized medical and mental health facilities. When classification is complete, detainees are escorted into staging areas that act as holding points before movement to their assigned facility. Rikers Island is not a single building, but a collection of separate jails, each with its own structure and operational challenges. The Otis Bantam Center, the George R. Virno Center, the Anna M. Cross Center, and various medical units all house different categories of detainees under different levels of control. The first hours after intake feel disorienting for many people entering custody. Jail uniforms are issued, along with bedding and basic hygiene supplies. Officers explain housing rules, daily procedures, and expectations for behavior. Some detainees will enter large dormitory-style areas with many others. Others will walk into tiered cell blocks where movement is more restricted. Oversight reports have repeatedly noted that conditions vary widely between facilities. Some units operate smoothly, while others face chronic staffing shortages and elevated tension. This stage is also one of the most psychologically heavy moments in the entire transfer process. Intake feels administrative, transportation feels temporary. Housing, however, represents the start of real confinement. The sounds inside the unit, echoing footsteps, slamming doors, officers calling instructions, and detainee conversations, quickly reinforce the reality that this is no longer a waiting period. This is where they will sleep, eat, argue, adapt, and endure. Before entering the unit, detainees undergo additional searches to ensure compliance with security rules. Approved property is issued, and officers record the detainee's arrival in unit logs. Accuracy is critical. A misclassification or failure to separate conflicting individuals can lead to serious incidents. Oversight bodies have stressed that proper placement is one of the most important factors in maintaining safety for both detainees and staff. Stepping into the assigned housing area completes the journey that began hours earlier in a courthouse. The chain of movement, court officers, holding cells, DOC paperwork, transport buses, medical screenings, and classification interviews, ends at this moment. The detainee is now fully integrated into the Rikers Island population. For many, this marks the beginning of weeks or months of uncertainty while court dates and legal processes unfold. For others, it becomes the opening chapter of a much longer stay. But for every person entering these units, the first night at Rikers Island is unforgettable. The transfer is over. The confinement begins. The reality of Rikers Island becomes unavoidable the moment a detainee enters their housing unit. The transfer process may be over, but the true challenge begins here, inside a system defined by strict routines, unspoken rules, and a constant undercurrent of tension. Each unit functions like its own world, shaped by the dynamic between detainees, officers, and the daily pressures of confinement. Every new arrival is expected to adjust quickly. Time moves differently in jail. Days are structured around counts, meals, medication calls, recreation periods, and movements controlled entirely by officers. A typical day begins early, often before sunrise, when officers perform the first head count. This is followed by breakfast distribution, medical rounds, and program callouts. Even the simplest actions, lining up, walking to recreation, receiving mail, are governed by rules designed to maintain order among hundreds of detainees. Inside housing areas, detainees learn to navigate social dynamics that are rarely discussed in official reports but well documented through years of oversight reviews and investigative journalism. Dorm-style units require constant awareness of noise, conflict, and proximity to others. Cell-based housing brings a different rhythm. Long periods of confinement broken by controlled movement and heavily supervised interactions. Officers monitor behavior and enforce regulations, but they cannot control every moment. The environment shifts quickly, influenced by stress, overcrowding, or sudden disputes. New detainees observe everything: who sits where, who speaks to whom, and which individuals command quiet respect. Information travels fast in jail, and misreading a situation can lead to problems. At the same time, not every unit is volatile. Some housing areas remain calm for weeks, operating more like regimented communities than chaotic spaces. The experience varies dramatically depending on staffing levels, classification categories, and the mix of personalities inside the unit. Programs and services also shape life at Rikers. Detainees may attend educational classes, substance use programs, religious services, or job assignments, depending on their classification. Participation can offer brief moments of normalcy, a break from the pressures of the housing unit, and in some cases, opportunities for reduced conflict. Despite these structured activities, uncertainty remains a constant element of life at Rikers. Court dates shift. Cases get adjourned. Legal outcomes hang over detainees' heads. Many spend long hours waiting for updates, hoping for release, transfer, or resolution. This uncertainty can fuel anxiety, frustration, or tension within the unit. Officers are trained to monitor these shifts, but the emotional strain of confinement affects people differently. Safety concerns are a persistent part of the environment. Oversight bodies have documented fluctuations in staffing, late responses to incidents, and occasional breakdowns in communication, all factors that can influence conditions inside the jails. Detainees quickly learn when to stay alert, when to step back, and how to keep themselves out of unnecessary conflict. As days turn into weeks, routines become familiar. Detainees develop personal patterns, choosing specific seats, forming small groups, or keeping entirely to themselves. Some find ways to cope through reading, writing, or staying focused on legal matters. Others struggle with the confinement, the noise, or the constant reminders of lost freedom. These first weeks inside Rikers shape a person's entire experience on the island. The transfer brought them here. The intake processed them. The housing unit absorbs them into the daily rhythm of jail life. Survival becomes a matter of awareness, adaptation, and managing each day as it comes. And for many, this chapter of their journey continues until the legal system decides what happens next: release, transfer, or a long wait inside one of the most complex jail systems in the United States. After the initial days inside Rikers, detainees begin to understand how tightly controlled every movement inside the jail system truly is. Daily operations are designed to manage thousands of people within a confined space, and nearly everything follows a precise routine. Nothing happens casually, and nothing happens without authorization. The way detainees move through the facility reflects the scale and complexity of the island itself. Movement inside Rikers is based on one principle: security first. Every door, hallway, and gate is controlled electronically by officers in secure stations. Detainees cannot walk anywhere without direction. Even short trips, to medical, to programs, to court, or to a different housing unit, require escort procedures and strict verification at multiple checkpoints. Identification wristbands are scanned, names are matched against movement logs, and officers confirm that the detainee is cleared for the next step of the route. Throughout the day, officers conduct frequent security checks known as tours. These inspections cover every part of the housing unit, from bunks and common areas to showers and recreation spaces. Officers look for contraband, unsafe conditions, damaged equipment, or early signs of conflict. Oversight reports note that these tours are a critical layer of prevention, but staffing shortages can affect how consistently they are performed. Still, every unit relies on this pattern of constant monitoring to maintain stability. Mealtimes also reveal how structured the environment is. Food is delivered from central kitchen facilities and distributed according to strict schedules. Officers count trays, monitor lines, and manage seating arrangements. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner follow a predictable rhythm, interrupted only by lockdowns or operational delays. For many detainees, meals become markers of time, one of the few consistent indicators of how the day is progressing. Medical operations form another essential part of daily life. Detainees requiring medication line up during designated times for distribution by medical staff. Elective appointments, sick calls, and emergency evaluations are routed through secured pathways. The medical system inside Rikers has faced years of scrutiny, but its role remains central to the daily functioning of the jail. Programs and services, education, counseling, substance use treatment, workforce training take place throughout the day as well. Participation depends on classification and availability, and units often operate under strict schedules to avoid overlap or overcrowding. These programs provide brief periods where detainees can step out of the constant tension of housing units and engage in structured activities. Recreation, mandated by policy, gives detainees time in outdoor or indoor yards depending on the facility. Here, movement is still controlled. Officers supervise from observation posts, monitoring interactions while keeping the group within designated boundaries. Even recreation, intended as a break, follows procedures meant to minimize risks. Counts remain one of the most important elements of daily operations. Multiple times each day, officers conduct formal head counts that require every detainee to be present and accounted for. These counts pause all movement inside the facility. Detainees must stand or sit in designated positions while officers verify identities and ensure that numbers match the logs. If something doesn't match, the entire facility can freeze until the discrepancy is resolved. Throughout all these operations, the underlying structure is the same. Rikers Island functions through rigid coordination and constant oversight. Detainees learn quickly that the system's predictability is both a source of stability and a reminder of confinement. Every door that opens does so because an officer allows it. Every movement is recorded. Every task follows a schedule. In this environment, routine becomes a form of control, and understanding the rhythm of daily operations becomes essential for navigating life inside the island. Inside Rikers Island, communication becomes one of the most important parts of a detainee's life. The outside world moves normally. Families go to work, court cases progress, lawyers prepare motions. But for detainees, information arrives slowly, filtered through layers of procedure and delay. This tension between waiting and uncertainty shapes much of the daily experience. The most critical form of communication is legal updates. Court dates determine when a detainee will leave the island temporarily and return to the courthouse to face a judge. These movements are scheduled days or weeks in advance, but they can change without warning due to case adjournments, attorney conflicts, or court congestion. Detainees often receive their updates through printed notices, officer announcements, or direct communication from their lawyers. A single change in a court date can shift someone's mindset from anxious anticipation to frustration, knowing they may remain on Rikers longer than expected. Phone calls are another essential connection to the outside world. Detainees line up to use designated phones, each call monitored and limited by strict time constraints. These conversations serve as emotional lifelines, updates from family, reassurance from loved ones, or coordination with legal representatives. Oversight reports frequently highlight how demand for phones often exceeds availability, creating tension during high-volume periods. Still, a short phone call can dramatically affect a detainee's outlook, offering a moment of clarity or hope amid an uncertain environment. Legal mail holds a special place inside Rikers. Letters from attorneys, public defenders, and courts are treated as confidential and must be delivered according to policy. For many detainees, legal mail is the most reliable form of communication about case progress. It can confirm trial dates, plea offers, motions filed, or evidence updates. Receiving a letter often becomes a highly anticipated moment, one of the few times detainees feel directly connected to their legal process rather than waiting for updates through the system. Visits from family also play a significant emotional role, though they come with heavy logistical challenges. Visitors must travel to Rikers Island, pass through strict security checkpoints, and wait in processing areas before entering visitation rooms. These visits can uplift detainees or, in some cases, intensify their emotional struggles. Oversight agencies have documented long wait times, staffing shortages, and transportation issues that occasionally disrupt visitation schedules. When visits do occur, they provide temporary escape from the tension of the housing unit, even if only for an hour. Court transportation itself becomes a cycle within the detainee's experience. Returning to the courthouse involves early wake-up times, movement through secured corridors, and another ride on the DOC transport bus. Court appearances can bring clarity, but they can also result in adjournments that send detainees back to Rikers with unanswered questions. The emotional weight of these repeated cycles is significant. Many detainees describe court days as the most stressful part of their incarceration, not because of the courtroom itself, but because of the uncertainty surrounding what will happen next. All these forms of communication, calls, letters, visits, legal updates, shape the psychological atmosphere inside the jail. Information is power in confinement, and delays or unclear messages can fuel anxiety, frustration, or disputes within housing units. Officers are trained to manage these tensions, but the emotional pressure of waiting for news from the outside world is an unavoidable part of life at Rikers. For detainees, the world beyond the island feels close yet unreachable. Their cases move forward, families wait, and decisions are made in courtrooms they won't see until their next scheduled date. Inside Rikers, time stretches between each update, and the future depends on papers, schedules, and decisions outside their control. Life inside Rikers Island is built on strict routines, but the reality is that tension can rise at any moment. With thousands of detainees housed across multiple facilities, the system must prepare for conflicts, medical emergencies, and unexpected disruptions. These incidents shape much of the day-to-day atmosphere, reminding everyone, officers and detainees alike, that stability inside a jail is never guaranteed. The response system begins with observation. Officers stationed in housing units, control booths, and corridor posts constantly scan for signs of trouble. A sudden argument, a detainee showing medical distress, or a disruption during recreation can trigger immediate action. Oversight reports confirm that even minor disturbances require documentation, and serious incidents activate multiple layers of response depending on severity. When a conflict breaks out, the first goal is containment. Officers issue verbal commands, separate involved individuals when possible, and call for additional staff through radio communication. Reinforcement teams may arrive from nearby units or specialized response groups trained to handle higher-risk situations. These teams work under policies designed to de-escalate conflict with minimal force, though the effectiveness varies depending on staffing levels and the nature of the incident. Medical emergencies follow a different protocol. If a detainee collapses, reports chest pain, loses consciousness, or shows symptoms of severe distress, officers must immediately notify the medical unit and request emergency assistance. Rikers has on-site medical staff, but response times are influenced by distance between facilities, escort availability, and the nature of the emergency. Medical teams arrive with portable equipment and determine whether the detainee needs treatment on-site or transport to a hospital outside the island. Fire alarms, facility malfunctions, and lockdowns also affect daily operations. A broken mechanical gate, flooding in a housing unit, or smoke from a kitchen area can shut down movement for hours. During a lockdown, detainees remain confined to their cells or dorm areas while officers conduct safety checks and supervisors coordinate repairs or investigations. These interruptions can escalate tension, especially when they delay meals, recreation, or medication distribution. One of the most documented challenges in oversight reports involves staffing shortages, which can slow response times, reduce supervision, or strain existing officers. When fewer staff are available, units may operate on modified routines, reducing movement or delaying programs. These conditions increase the likelihood of disputes as detainees grow frustrated with extended waiting times or inconsistent schedules. Despite these challenges, the response system inside Rikers is built on layers of communication. Control booths monitor video feeds, radio channels connect officers across buildings, and supervisors track every call for assistance. After each notable incident, officers must file detailed reports explaining what happened, who was involved, and how the situation was resolved. These reports become part of official records used by oversight bodies to evaluate jail operations. From the detainee perspective, incidents, whether medical or behavioral, carry a heavy psychological impact. A medical emergency may heighten anxiety about health. A fight in the unit can shift social dynamics and raise tensions for days. A sudden lockdown can leave detainees uncertain about what is happening beyond their housing area. These events serve as reminders of how fragile routine can be inside a crowded, high-stress environment. While the public often sees Rikers Island as a single place, the reality is a complex system where officers respond to dozens of issues every day. Some are solved quietly, others ripple across the facility. Incidents test the limits of staffing, coordination, and policy, revealing how heavily the system depends on rapid communication and controlled movement. Inside these walls, stability is never automatic. It must be maintained, monitored, and rebuilt every time the unexpected occurs. While daily life inside Rikers Island is shaped by officers, detainees, and internal procedures, another layer of the system operates outside the walls: oversight and accountability. These mechanisms are designed to monitor the jail's performance, evaluate safety conditions, and ensure the rights of detainees are protected. For many people, this part of the system is invisible, yet it influences nearly every decision made on the island. The primary oversight body is the New York City Board of Correction, an independent agency that sets minimum standards for treatment, housing, healthcare, and use of force. Their inspectors visit facilities, assess conditions, observe operations, and review incident reports. Their findings shape policy changes, highlight deficiencies, and influence long-term reforms. Public reports from the board often reveal systemic challenges such as staffing shortages, delayed medical care, or failures in documentation, issues that can directly affect daily life for detainees. Another major player is the federal monitor, appointed through court orders to track compliance with specific reforms. These monitors examine security procedures, response times, documentation accuracy, and facility operations. Their assessments are detailed and often technical, reviewing everything from officer training to housing conditions. The monitor's reports hold significant weight because they reflect federal oversight, which can mandate stronger corrective actions when necessary. Legal advocates also play a crucial role. Organizations across New York City regularly file lawsuits, produce investigative reports, and represent detainees in civil actions involving jail conditions. Their work often brings attention to slow medical responses, inadequate supervision, or administrative delays. Through advocacy, they push the city to address structural problems that might otherwise remain hidden. Inside Rikers, officers and supervisors must follow strict reporting requirements. Every use of force, medical emergency, equipment malfunction, or disturbance must be documented. These reports move through multiple levels of review, from unit supervisors to facility leadership, and then to central DOC administration. Inconsistent or incomplete documentation can trigger audits, retraining, or disciplinary action. The accuracy of these records matters, not only for accountability, but for safety decisions that affect future operations. Video surveillance is another tool for oversight. Housing units, corridors, and common areas are equipped with cameras that record daily activity. When incidents occur, footage is pulled for review by supervisors and investigators to confirm whether policies were followed. This footage often becomes part of official evaluations and, in some cases, legal proceedings. The New York City Council also exercises oversight power, holding hearings where DOC administrators testify about conditions, budgets, staffing, and policy decisions. These hearings often highlight gaps in resources or areas needing improvement, forcing the department to explain or defend its operations. Public scrutiny, amplified through media coverage, pressures the system to address recurring issues. Medical oversight comes from external health agencies and providers contracted to serve Rikers Island. They monitor patient care, emergency response times, and compliance with health standards. Identified problems, such as insufficient staffing or delayed evaluations, often appear in public medical oversight reports, prompting policy adjustments. While these layers of oversight aim to protect detainees and improve operations, the impact is not immediate. Reforms take time, implementation varies across facilities, and some changes require significant resources. Still, the presence of oversight bodies ensures that conditions on the island are continually examined, documented, and debated. For detainees, this system of accountability exists mostly in the background. They may not see inspectors walking through units or read the detailed reports, but they experience the results: new procedures, increased supervision, policy adjustments, or facility-wide changes that stem from external pressure. Inside Rikers, oversight acts as a steady reminder that everything happening behind the walls is being watched, evaluated, and recorded. Even in a closed environment, accountability echoes through every level of the system. As days turn into weeks, every detainee inside Rikers Island reaches a point where the transfer process gives way to a new reality. What happens next? The answer depends on court decisions, legal strategy, housing stability, and the unpredictable timeline of the justice system. For many, this final stage of the journey becomes the most mentally demanding because the future is shaped by factors largely outside their control. The most anticipated outcome is release, whether through bail, case dismissal, or a judge's decision. When release is granted, the process does not happen instantly. Detainees must wait for paperwork to move from the courthouse to DOC, and then through multiple verification steps inside the facility. Oversight reports consistently note that release times vary due to staffing, transportation, and system delays. Still, for those finally approved, walking out of Rikers is often described as surreal, stepping from a highly controlled environment back into the noise and speed of the city. Another path is transfer. Some detainees are moved to state facilities after sentencing, others to medical units, therapeutic housing, or alternative programs, depending on their circumstances. These movements follow the same controlled procedures that brought them to Rikers: paperwork verification, identity checks, and supervised transportation. The uncertainty of where they will go next adds an emotional weight to the experience, especially for individuals facing long-term sentences. For many detainees, however, the most common outcome is the long wait, remaining on Rikers while their cases move through the court system. This period can be unpredictable. Court dates get adjourned, legal motions take time, and new information can shift cases in unexpected directions. The waiting becomes part of the daily rhythm, influencing mood, tension, and the atmosphere inside housing units. Some detainees focus on programs or education to pass the time. Others anchor themselves in routine to cope with the uncertainty. Legal outcomes are only one part of the equation. Behavior, housing stability, and health also influence what comes next. Detainees who face medical challenges may require ongoing treatment. Those with mental health needs may be reassigned to specialized units or receive additional services. Housing adjustments can occur due to conflicts, safety concerns, or facility-wide reorganizations. Each shift requires new documentation, new movements, and another cycle of controlled transitions. Family support plays a major role in this stage. Visits, phone calls, and letters often provide motivation during long periods of waiting. However, these connections can also be stressful. Families worry, detainees feel pressure, and emotional strain increases when legal progress slows. Officers and counselors may intervene when individuals struggle to adapt to extended confinement, using programs or services to help stabilize the environment. The justice system's pace affects everyone inside Rikers, shaping a sense of time that rarely matches the outside world. A detainee may feel that weeks have passed, while in court, only minor procedural steps have occurred. The disconnect creates frustration, but it also reinforces the structured reality of jail life. Everything depends on documentation, approval, and scheduled movement controlled by external systems. By this stage, detainees understand the full cycle of confinement, from courtroom remand to courtroom returns, from housing assignment to daily routines. The process that began with a judge's order now stretches into countless decisions, procedures, and moments of waiting. For some, resolution is close. For others, it remains distant. For every detainee on Rikers Island, the future is shaped by a single reality. Their next step, release, transfer, or continued confinement, depends on systems moving far beyond the walls that hold them. From the courtroom steps to the gates of Rikers Island, every moment of the journey is controlled, recorded, and shaped by a system far bigger than any one person. For some, this path ends in release. For others, it leads to months of waiting or a transfer far beyond the city. Like, subscribe, and share for more real-life prison system documentaries from HFD Achieve Crimes, and stay with us as we uncover hidden stories behind America's correctional system. But no matter the outcome, one truth remains. The road to Rikers is just the beginning of a much longer story.